Hi, Tammy. Oh, and Carlan and Andrea. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was gonna ask, does anybody know a photo be their like, I don't know, screensaver instead of just this blank person? Anybody know how to do that?
I was just thinking the same thing. That is so bizarre you said that.
Well, it's
I
because
don't-
we're sitting here looking at our blank people.
I know, right? I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, there was a way.
Uh-oh. It cut you out. I think probably Gina's joining, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, my husband does IT, so he at one point did do that for me, but I don't know where it went.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. Okay. I have to just Google it. I should have Googled it a long time ago. um, now I have a picture of myself as the background. I guess I can turn on video and just and just have that, I guess, for now. 'Cause I'm
You're
tired of looking
braver.
at this little Blake person.
Well, you're braver than I am because I'm not putting any video on today.
Mhm. Well, I feel like I always come in, not always, but most of the time I don't do video. So let's see. Now can I? Okay, so here's what you guys see me. Oh no, you can't see me yet. Okay. I'm in front of myself. So what I'm gonna do is just have the camera like that.
That is awesome. I love it so much.
How vain. Anyway,
That's cute. That's so cute of you.
Did anything, I don't know, fun or exciting happen over the last few days? You guys are doing good and well, I'll share because I'm excited. Oh. What do you have? Go ahead.
I said, well, we're boring, aren't we?
No, it's not boring. I mean, every day can't be, something new and exciting, I guess. But I'm going out of town next week, right? I'm going to Colombia. And everybody says it. I should have believed it, but I have 5 pendings in the last like 4 days because I'm going out of town, I feel like. So wish me luck, please pray for me.
That's exactly how it happens. Twice when I went out of town, I was writing offers when I was on the plane going up into the air. I kid you not. Good luck.
Well, I mean, I'm happy, but it's like I'm so anxious right now. It's crazy. Like I just don't feel like everything's gonna be okay, but it will be. Like I'm on top of the stuff. It's just I don't know. But this is the first time I've ever had to use like a big calendar to put everything on it. Like inspection due this day, ROC due this day, earnest money due this day. Like I'm very happy to have made that next step to have to use a calendar like that, like off of my phone. You know what I mean? So I can see it all in one place.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Gina.
Sounds like you guys are a full swing conversation. Continue.
No.
Did you
I'm kidding.
say no?
I'm kidding. I was telling them how I'm going out of town, and of course, I have all these things that came under contract in the last couple of days. But I'm happy because it's the first time I've had to use like a big calendar to write everything, like when earnest money's due, ROC is due, inspection, this and that, like all these different things. I have to put in front of me now because there's so much going on.
It always happens. So, but that's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. Well, today is meeting day at Living, so we're just going to jump right in and get started. Denise and I are going to co-host today. So
Hey,
let
Denise.
me do a share screen here. Oh, you know what?
Should I log on Zoom?
Why don't you do that? Yeah, so that way you can see that as we have sometimes over here, we have a training room conflict. So we're doing it from this middle room. So yeah, if you just hit mute, that way it won't get feedback from that. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the 3 Ps in negotiating skills. And this is actually an Ignite class. And so we're going to go through the Ignite slides. I already uploaded this whole thing into the Google Drive training folder, so you guys have access to it there. And we're going to kind of talk about the parts of it that's we really think Janice and I went through it yesterday that is beneficial to you. So a lot of Ignite classes have a couple of things. First, let me say this. Does everyone know what Ignite is and what those classes are? Has anyone attended?
No, I don't know. And
I
I'm not
don't know.
attending.
Okay. So I mentioned on Monday, do you want to tell them what is Ignite?
Ignite is like I say it's like a mini bold. It's really like a introduction to how to do real estate like as a whole, right? But it breaks it down into sections. So it covers like buyers, listings, how to get appointments, how to talk to people, like all of that. I actually enjoyed Ignite when I first started. It was like I think we did it for like 3 or 4 weeks, but it was at night. We did
Okay.
like night for like 3 hours at night, but it was really good.
And
It's one of my
so
favorites,
It is
actually.
a variety of, or I should say a series. It is a series of trainings that is put together by Corporate KW. And it's meant to be something that you do several days in a row for many weeks. Or we did it, I think, last year, and we kind of traded through the market centers. And I think we did it 2 days a week, and then we did it for like 12 weeks or something like that. So rather than trying to condense it like that, I like to sprinkle the Ignite topics, because I think they're really valuable, into our normal training rather than doing it like a series. Because a lot of people, just can't come 4 days in a row and spend 4 hours, So there are some parts of Ignite, and you'll see on the PowerPoint when I share screen here, that there's homework for you to do, much like Bold for anyone who's took Bold. And then there's mini little sessions where you all kind of group up and do some exercises. Well, obviously we can't do that on Zoom. So we're just going to cut that part out of it. But so throughout the year this year, I will sprinkle in an Ignite class. And I won't necessarily say every month, but from time to time, we will most definitely sprinkle in some of that Ignite. So today, I'm going to do a share screen here. We are talking about your negotiating skills.
Which are going to be very, very important.
That's
I
right.
feel come spring market.
That's right. Absolutely. Because it's like, but this is the key to, so we can talk all the time about, where does your business come from? And how many hours a day am I lead generating? And how many open houses am I hosting? Those kinds of things. But bottom line is, if we don't know how to negotiate a contract, all the time that you invest in lead generation and getting to the point where you are working with buyers and sellers and fortunate enough to either be writing an offer or negotiating an offer for your seller, if you can't get that to come to an agreement, then guess what happens? Nobody wins. We don't get paid. The buyer doesn't get the house. And sometimes if you don't handle it properly, you could even lose the buyer.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you can agree, and some of you, I'm sure, have stories on here, that even when we did our very best to get a buyer a house, they still blame us for not getting it. In
Yeah.
particular, in this past couple years, with there being such a, enormous amount of multiple offers. So that's why I felt like it was a great time to have a conversation about the path and negotiations. So here we're kind of just going to go through and talk a little bit about that. And let's see, where was my slide that said 3 Ps? Well, we'll get to it. So a couple things about the path. So either you write an offer and it's accepted, and then you close. Easiest path.
The easiest one you're going to have.
We want option 1, right? And there is an occasional time that option 1 happens, but most of the time you're going to fall somewhere in between and or on option number 2, which is where you write the offer and then it's rejected or countered. So I'm sure that all of you have different stories that you can tell about that. And I can tell you, and we're going to talk later about preparation for your offer too. The communication that you have with the other agent is so, so important. And in particular, in this hot seller's market when there's multiple offers. So we really need to start that communication before you even write the offer. So nonetheless, you submit your offer. It's either rejected or countered. If it's rejected or countered, do we all know that you can still negotiate if it was rejected? Would everyone agree that a rejection really is just another counter offer?
I didn't realize necessarily.
So a rejection really just means that they're not taking your offer. So to me, that what I hear then is that they're countering basically back at full price again. So they're rejecting your offer and they're saying, we're not even going to counter because they don't like the offer. So that doesn't mean it's done. So knowing that is really important, because to me, if someone just flat out rejects it, then I'm going to go back to my buyer and I'm going to say, okay, that doesn't mean that we can't adjust our offer. That just means how much do you want the house, and let's adjust our offer. And so how I handle that with my buyers is, let's just ignore that they rejected it. And now let's move to whatever our plan B was, even had they countered. So I like to keep digging until we can really just get to a point. And listen, if the buyer says, no, I'm not moving forward, then we're done. But then we go into negotiations, and that can go back and forth multiple times. So, I mean, I can be honest, and I don't know if anyone, you're fine, has an example, but I mean, I've probably had transactions that have gone back and forth in negotiations like 8 and 9 times before we got to get it together. Sometimes we have to inch our way there. And then ultimately it's either accepted or it doesn't come together, and then we come to close. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So rejection as in no, like, okay, my question is, if they come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, the seller went with a different offer, that's it, right? Like, you
Different.
can't
That's a
say-
different story. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
okay,
different
yeah,
story.
so
At that
let's get it
point,
again.
though, at that
Mhm.
point, you can ask your buyer if they want to be a secondary on there.
Yes.
That's right. Thank you for
Because
bringing that up.
sometimes the
Yes.
primary does fall through. And then I've had the primary fall through and
Many
my secondary offer be accepted and become the primary. So that's another
Ask her.
conversation with your buyer to see, and the seller to see if they will accept the secondary. So, another point of negotiation, because you still negotiate that secondary offer
Yep.
as well.
And that
Thank
is a good point when you even have listings. If you have a listing and you have multiple offers, don't miss the opportunity to have a backup offer. Most buyers are willing to have a backup offer on a property. Here's the wording though. So if I'm writing a backup offer and I'm representing my buyer, I don't want my buyer to be locked in, because I know what you guys are thinking. The buyer might not want to be locked into a transaction and have to wait to see if it falls through or not. What if they find something else? I know that's what you're thinking. So here's how you avoid that. In additional terms and conditions or on an addendum or wherever, you just write that this secondary offer can be void at any time that the buyer sees fit during the backup offer period. So you have to write during the backup offer period, because if you leave that little part off, that means that your buyer can pull at any time,
Yeah.
even if the deal comes to their, lap. So you're just writing that this is a secondary offer for the period of time, basically, that the buyer sees fit. And if they find something else, then in writing, they just have to say they're pulling their secondary offer. And they can do that all the way up until the secondary offer is in place. So if the first deal falls through and then you're put in that next position, then they bought that house. So, just be careful that you immediately, here's what I'll say. If you have a secondary offer on a property, do not write another offer on a house until you've pulled your secondary offer. They could have bought 2 houses. It would be like this. Buyer goes out and looks at 5 houses and they decide the 2 houses I like are both going to be multiple offers. Let's put an offer in on both and see which one we get. Well, you could get both. So we can't do that. Like legally, unless they want to buy 2 houses, we can't do that. So same thing. So be very careful. Write that down. If you're going to do a secondary offer, you cannot go writing an offer on another property and see if it sticks before you pull the secondary offer in writing. questions
Can
on
the
that.
can the secondary offer be pulled at any, I know you mentioned a date, but in the
No.
instance that
I
the
didn't say
secondary,
a date. I said at any time.
So
Okay,
usually, I think on our contract, we have to put that it's a secondary up to so many days.
Oh,
I
okay.
think on ours, you have to put a date in there or a number in there.
the
So
living
I
one, you have to put a date.
usually say that again.
You do have to put a date, and I was gonna have a follow-up about that.
Yeah,
I'm
and
sorry
the
to interrupt.
date that I put when I do them normally is up until what I feel like they should have had their inspections, because normally it falls apart at inspection.
Yeah.
So I will put maybe like 10 days.
Yeah.
Because they should have had their inspection by then, and they should know if it's gonna move forward.
So I think this though, so you could still put, you could even put 30 days, to be honest.
You
As
could,
long as you write in additional terms and conditions or on an addendum that the buyer reserves the right to void this contract at any time during the period, and everybody agreed upon that, then you're still fine to pull, because
Mhm.
maybe if you did put 10 days, day 3, they find a house. So you still want to make sure that you write that in additional terms, just to make sure they have the option to get out.
Here's a
But you
follow.
said the buyer reserves the right to pull the offer at any time.
So the buyer reserves the right to void this secondary offer at any time. And don't forget this is the bold point, during the secondary offer period.
Okay,
You have to write that, because otherwise what you're saying is if the first deal falls through and your buyer falls into now being, the offer that's pending, if you just write it like that, that means that they could decide to void the contract 2 days before closing. So you have to write during the secondary offer period, which then gives them the right to go out looking at other houses and then make an offer on something else. But you need to then in writing pull your offer before you write another offer on something else.
So real quick, for living, that is written into our contract, so you don't have to do a addendum for
Very
it.
nice.
I only know about living, so.
Ours, so Legacy and I'm not sure about Elevate, but I can tell you Legacy only has a little checkbox that says secondary offer. We don't have that paragraph,
Okay.
so that's great.
So living, you're covered, as long
Thank
as
you.
you put a date right there. Okay,
Perfect.
I just wanted to
So-
check.
Thank you.
One more follow-up about the secondary offer. Are they supposed to, is the seller or agent supposed to have the seller sign off on that within, like a
Yes.
few days, or?
You
Yeah,
Just like a
negotiate
regular
it.
offer.
Yep.
They sign it just like a regular offer.
Right, but like they don't wait until the other deal falls through. They do it immediately.
No.
That's what locks you into being accepted
Correct.
if they fall through. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yep,
I wish that when we're in here, they can't
I know.
here. Like it's
That's
bad
the-
enough we
that's
have to
the
sit in
horrible
here
part,
and then we
is
have the
the
printer.
printing.
In any case, so any other questions on that? Because I don't want it to be unclear and then I get a call from one of our brokers in the next week that we really said it. Are we clear on that? And so the benefits of your buyer is that a lot of times deals fall through at inspections, at appraisal, like a lot of different things, happen. So it's a great idea, I think.
Gina?
Okay. Yep.
Can you repeat that? So when I just want to make sure that I'm clear and I have it correct if I'm writing this on an offer or on an addendum. So the buyer reserves the right to pull an offer at any time during the secondary offer period?
That's right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. All right. So who do we negotiate with? I know it may come to a surprise as we are negotiating with our clients because we're having to counsel them sometimes. And then of course, the other agent on the other side of the transaction. I'll give you an example. I have a buyer that was adamant that the home inspector told them that the roof was installed incorrectly on the property. And it wasn't. It's a relatively new house. We had a roofer out there and the roofer said, I don't even know what they're seeing or why they're saying that. It's absolutely not true. It's got lots of different pictures in the roof, so it looks like it was a very difficult roof to install. Nonetheless, there's nothing wrong with it. My buyer was adamant that the home inspector was right, and they wanted $10,000 off the price of the house. So what did you say at that point? I know, like, that at this point, now I have to negotiate with my client to have them see reason. And so knowing how to counsel your clients properly in that kind of a situation is going to help you because that deal would have fallen through. Because they had lost their mind thinking that the seller was going to credit them something, $10,000. When we had a roofer that they chose, by the way, who said, absolutely not, the home inspector is incorrect. So now I had to get to that point where I do what's called a takeaway tactic. You know what, guys? It sounds like this isn't the house for you. It sounds like you must not want the house and you're looking for reasons to, nitpick stuff and back out.
Mhm.
And they were like, no, we love the house. We want the house. Oh, because it sounds like you don't, because you're adamant that this repair needs to happen. And we have a roofer that you chose that said it doesn't. So that is where it becomes time to start to negotiate with your clients and knowing how to talk to them about that. And knowing, by the way, first, that you need to do that. I mean, how would it have been if I would have went back to the listing agent and said, my buyer still wants 10,000 off the house? We would have lost the deal. By the way, there were multiple offers. And also the agent wouldn't have to tell me that they had a secondary offer. So let's talk about that because I get this call all the time. Oh my gosh, my buyer wrote an addendum. We wrote an addendum for repairs. And then I got a mutual release from the listing agent. And then they said that they sold it to somebody else. How did that just happen? Let me repeat that. My buyer wrote a repair request. And instead of the seller just saying no, the listing agent sent over a mutual release. And then they told us that they sold the house to somebody else. Questions? I know that makes like people go, what? How can that happen? So when your buyer writes a repair request, they have opened up the door for renegotiations. And they now have, so think of it this way, all things have to be equal. Equal to the buyer, equal to the seller. Would we agree that the buyer is the one who thinks they have leverage when they say, we want these repairs? That's sort of a threat. We won't buy the house if you don't agree, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
seller has to have the same rights. And so therefore, when the buyer opens up the contract and starts to renegotiate things, that gives the seller the right not only to say no, but to send a mutual release. And in particularly, imagine this. Imagine that the house is, we've accepted your buyer's offer. And literally within an hour, we get another offer that's better. You know what the seller is going to say? Oh my gosh, this is a better offer. Can I take this offer? Unfortunately, no, we cannot, but we can ask them to be a secondary offer. So you know what the seller and the listing agent's doing, right? They're just waiting for your buyer to ask for crazy stuff. And then they're going to void the contract and sell it because they don't have to. So remember this, the listing agent does not have to tell the buyer's agent that they have a secondary offer. They absolutely do not. And so I get this call all the time from people, agents in coaching. Oh my God, the agent didn't even tell me they had a secondary offer. I'm just not sure why you thought that they needed to. It's just like how a listing agent doesn't have to tell you that there's multiple offers without the seller's permission to do so. And believe me, when I say some sellers are like, no, I don't want everyone to know because I don't want people to pull their offer. I want everyone to go on their highest and best, and we're going to pick one. And in particular, if they have a really good one that stands out. Questions about that?
Okay,
So
this
it's
is
still
good.
up to your seller as far as how they want to handle that, though, as if you gather all those at the beginning, if there are multiple offers, or if,
It's always up to your seller.
yeah, okay.
Always. So we never make those decisions, and also be really careful. When you're talking to your clients, buyers or sellers, I'm an option provider, period. I don't tell you what I would do. I don't tell you what I think you should do. I'm an option provider. Here's Mr. Seller or Mr. Buyer. Here's option number 1, and here's option number 2. So we've gotten an offer. We can accept it, we can reject it, or we can counter it. It's the same in this case when we're working with the buyer. The seller gave us a counter offer. We can accept their counter offer, we can counter it again, or we can be done.
And what if they ask you, like for this one I have under contract?
Yeah.
He asked me, like, what do you think I should do? And I just figured out, like, this is the percentage of the asking price. At first it was 88%.
Okay.
I said, you know, maybe that'll help you make a decision. Like, I didn't know.
So you're just giving information, so that's okay.
That's really smart.
Yeah, I think so.
And he
You
did
gave
say,
them.
he's like, wow, that really kind of put it in perspective. Because you think it's up, because it was $8.95, they offered $7.95. So he's like, oh my gosh, 100 off. I said, well, it's 88%.
Yeah.
So, I think that helped get us to where we needed to be, but, you know, if they ask you, what should I counter at? You're like.
So, no, and that's okay. And I love that question because that's a lot of people feel that way. And so that's where I go again and say, you know what, I'm an option provider. So let me give you a couple of options. And then I love that you pulled in that stat. So sometimes it's statistics. And when you're working with the seller, don't forget the seller's net sheet. Because a lot of times they focus on the purchase price, but really what matters to them is the net.
Is what they net.
Yep,
So
And-
once you back out taxes, once you back out
Mhm.
all of that,
yep.
what they currently owe on the house, they'll see how much they're getting.
Yep.
And that most times is like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I was getting this much,
Okay.
or I'm okay with this offer because of whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also pull comps. So when they're not sure what to counter, we'll look at the comps and say, you know, based on what's sold and what's in this area, this is kind of
Absolutely.
per square footage, this is what you're looking
And we're
at.
gonna be doing that more again here
Yeah.
with the comparables. Now, you know, with buyers, it's a little bit different right now with comps because things are going for 15,000. My example from before, when they wanted 10,000 off because of the roof. Do you know why they had that number in their mind? Because they paid 15,000 over asking price. So they were trying to recover some of the money that they paid over asking price because we were multiple offers. So they wanted to do that because that's how they got the house and then they lose their self later, right?
Yep.
So common points of negotiation are price and terms. Janice, we all know price is price, right? And so we're gonna negotiate price, we're gonna have our conversations and scripts about the price. What other kinds of things in terms do you think are those kind of typical things we're gonna negotiate?
So terms, I look at terms as inspection is a term, right? Whether or not you're gonna have an inspection or not. And all the different types of inspections. It's just not the general, it's the radon, the, you know, test, all of that. Also terms can be title company. Terms can be possession, like when you need to take possession of the house, or if the seller needs longer time in the house to, you know, they need to stay past closing. It can be closing date, it can be appraisal. So there's a lot of different terms. It can be the appliances in the kitchen, like terms can be a lot of different things. And based on what you ask for, can be a deal breaker for the seller. So if you're asking for too much, they can be like, this is too much. So I just tell my clients to make sure you're asking for things that you really need and what's included in the house. Don't go asking for drapes if the drapes was not included.
Yeah.
And the thing, I mean, you're really asking for, you know what I mean? Not that they may not leave them anyway. But when you start to ask for all their stuff, oh, they need to leave this table or this table, like, it's just too much.
Right.
So make it as clean as possible. And Rick will tell you, like, try not to put any chattel on the contract, because once you put it on there, then the appraiser looks at that, lender looks at that, like it just muddies the deal. When that stuff can be negotiated outside of the contract between the buyer and the seller directly. To leave the realtors out of that, because we should not be negotiating furniture
No,
I
ever.
agree.
no, not at all. And what's funny about that is, I always call it the hot tub issue. I say a hot tub because it's one of those things that the seller doesn't want to take because it's too heavy, like you need a crane or you
Or a
need, you know.
piano.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's ridiculous.
And then,
Uh,
but they don't want to leave it for free. They don't want to take it, but they don't want to leave it for free. So then it becomes, then we're negotiating a hot tub instead of a house. So we have to stop losing sight of the things
Yeah.
and focus on the house. And in particular, when buyers start to get crazy. So I will tell you, this is a kind of a controversial kind of a way of doing it, but we had this agent at Legacy and this is how he wrote every offer for his buyer. I don't know how I feel about it, but I'll put it out there. He would have his conversation with his buyer about, you know, the house and what they wanted to offer and things like that. And then he would say, okay, I'm going to prepare the offer for you, how I think you should write it to get it. So he wrote the offer, he put the price, he put the terms, he wrote everything, and then he sent it over to them and said, now what changes do we need to make?
That's interesting.
That's very
He
interesting.
got a lot of houses sold. He got a lot of houses sold. So basically what he was saying to his buyers, this is my option number one for you. If you want to get this house, this is how I think that your offer should be written for this particular house. Do you agree with it? If not, we'll make any changes that you want to. Here's why I think it gets murky. Of course, he's saying no to inspections. And then later, when we have an issue, they're gonna say, yes, in fact, my agent gave me the opportunity to do inspections, but he wrote initially no. So I would be careful with that, but I mean, it did work for him. And his
Yeah.
buyers rave about him. Like, they love that he took that out of their hands. He didn't say, here's what we're offering. But he did in fact say, this is what I think should be the very best. So in the Google Drive, I do have a form that says something, I forget the name of it, but writing your very best offer in multiple offers. And it goes through all of that. You will have to be really careful though about the inspection piece. Also know this, there are counties, there are cities, there are places that there are certain inspections that are going to be required. And so you cannot write a no inspections offer on a point of sale in Summit County well and septic. So be aware where you're selling houses, that you need to know what's going on there and what kind of, like, I know Lakewood is one of those places that has city type inspections that are required in a house. So you have to know that. If you don't know it, by the way, guys, this is going to be harsh, then you shouldn't be selling houses there. It's your responsibility to know where you're selling houses or where you're listing houses, what things might be required. So, for example, I learned this because I didn't know. I listed a house in Stowe. Stowe has a meth disclosure. Who knew? Who knew? How I found out was the buyer's agent said, where's your meth disclosure? And I'm like, wait, what? So that's a required, yeah. So they must have had problems in the city of Stowe with that, and now there's a
Way
disclosure.
back when we did.
Okay. Oh, you live in Stowe?
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
I live
okay.
behind Niceville.
Oh, okay. So then you know. So yes,
I'm-
know your areas.
So I would say this, be careful with that approach of writing an offer
Yeah.
and then sending it to them, because it can backfire on you, because you never want a client to say, you forced me to write to do this way, and now I'm into this deal, and it come back legally on you. I think most brokers will tell you not to do that way.
It's a very thin line.
Very.
I thought he sold a lot of
That makes me
houses,
nervous.
but I myself have not ever done that. I don't even like to really say, this is what I recommend. I don't like using those words. I like saying I'm an option provider and here's your couple of options. Have multiple options for them every step of the way. Even as you're negotiating repairs, well, here's one option,
Mhm.
and here's another option. And here's what can happen depending on which option we go to. All right, so the 3 Ps: prepare, present, and position. Preparing is.
sorry, before we-
Build. Go ahead.
Before we move along, where exactly, okay, so in the instance that you found out about the meth disclosure, how would we find those things out, right? You found that out because of the listing agent. So where would we be
buyer's
looking?
agent,
The buyer's agent. So where would we be looking for that type of information?
Yeah, that's a great question, because every city has different things.
I don't think you would look on this, the city has a website, and if you look at their, I would say the city or the title company, usually those 2 places know what needs to be
Honestly,
disclosed.
even your lenders, a lot of times.
Sometimes
are
it
aware.
depends. If you have these internet lenders that are
Sure.
out of state, they won't know, but if you have your title company, or if you look on the city's website, because every city has a housing link off of their website, it should tell you the requirements for that area.
Like, I know, you just start to know, like, I know Summit County has what's called point of sale well and septic. Point of sale means you can't close without them. Stark County has a required septic inspection, but it's not point of sale, and they don't have a well.
Geauga also
It's
has.
within a period of time of the closing.
Geauga
Yep.
has a
The
a
septic.
septic inspection.
But I think they just dropped it. I think they
Did
just,
they?
I think they did because I think they're getting away with.
Also this, I would say this,
Do you-
talk to other agents that you know sell in those areas, like utilize your resources within KW. And who might be someone that sells a lot in that area is gonna be able to help you with a lot of that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
All right, preparing. I would say the preparation is so important and I'm sure Janice would agree. Part of preparing to write your offer is going to be number one, having the right conversations and setting expectations for with your buyer. So what might that look like? So I'm going to have a conversation with my buyer before we write the offer and let them know a couple of things. Letting them know how many days the house has been on the market. When we all agree that's extremely important. It's just got listed yesterday and we know that there has been a calendar filled with showings. Your buyer needs to know that. Probably they do. I don't know about you guys, but like last summer, I showed a house that I was absolutely in a state of shock that it was like not just an open house, it was like a parade of homes.
Yeah,
You couldn't take a step without another agent and a buyer in the
That's
room.
annoying.
I've had
That's
that.
so
It was like
fucking
30 people in the house
Yep.
at one time. It was so annoying. And my client they couldn't freely talk to me. I'm
Nope.
like, well, let's just walk through and we can talk outside. Like
Yep.
it was like that kind of, we were stepping over each other, like
Yeah.
trying to get
I hate
involved.
There's situations that way. And here's understand the flip side of it though. As a listing agent, you can't win because either the calendar is completely booked out, blacked out, and
And
then you're
nobody can get
calling
in.
and they're like, wait, I can't get in. What are my chances of getting an offer? And if I can't even get in? Then the listing agent just leaves it open and says, go ahead and do overlapping showings. And then we want private time. So it's, you
Yeah.
can't, you know what I mean? Like it's one or the other.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It
Yeah,
is, it is.
yeah.
Here's another key component to preparation is contacting the listing agent. You have got to contact a listing agent before you write the offer and let them know I'm going to be sending over an offer. Because here's the thing, they might say, don't bother, we already just accepted an offer.
Yep.
That happens all the time. The
Yeah.
other part is, okay, just so that you know, we have 15 other offers, or we have 2 other offers, or we have no other offers. That's good information to help your buyer prepare. Also letting your buyer know what to expect ahead of time. So these are the kind of conversations that you're having with your buyers before even writing an offer. If you have the chance, because sometimes you just meet somebody and then they want to see houses and you're doing it right at the moment they're writing the offer. But the more that you can set the expectations with your client ahead of time. So here's what to expect, guys, in this market right now. We're lots of multiple offers. We're not going to have a lot of time to think about it. I know we're the kind of a buyer who likes to sleep on it, or you want to pray on it, or you want to talk to your spouse for 3 days about it. Like we've heard all these things, right? There's not going to be time for that. So in this market, I just need you to be prepared to make a quick decision. And then even in the countering process, you're going to have to be quick. And so preparing them,
And
right?
part of prepare also is, a lot of that is done in a buyer consult. Y'all do not sleep on having a buyer consultation with your client. Because a part of that also is giving them a copy of the contract so they don't have to read it once you send it to them.
Oh, that's
That's
actually
great.
Because
really
it's
cool.
so hard to read while you're trying to sign, because
Yeah.
that thing moves really, really quick.
Yeah.
And so they miss a whole paragraph and then they're like, I don't know what I signed. So I always give my clients a copy of the contract ahead of time and ask them if they have any questions, go over it with them if they have questions. So that when we get to a house, we can move quickly. Like, you like this house? Okay, I'm getting an offer in. We don't have to worry about
Right,
like,
yeah.
what does this say? What does that mean? No, we've already covered that.
Yeah.
Especially your high C personalities who want to read sentence to sentence and question you, and 3 days later, they're still on line 78.
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah.
So yeah, be very much
Yeah.
so setting those expectations from the beginning. And then present, moving into negotiations, starts when, of course, you present that offer. And then position. That's when we're going to say, you know what, my position here in this offer, and you know, where do I want to land? What's my position? It also changes. When you agree your buyer's position is going to change. Today, when I'm making the offer, my position is here. But my position is going to change when the closer that we get to losing the house, honestly,
Mhm.
but I still want it. like what someone may tell me, I'm not gonna go over this number. And then when it becomes real, that position may
Yeah, and
change.
they'll go over. Yep.
For sure. All right, so let's talk about prepare. I'll let Janice take
So
this.
preparing, both you and your buyer need to, or seller, need to know what the end goal is. Like you need to know what your client's goal is, what they absolutely need, what's must have or win for them. Know your client for sure, like know what they can afford, know what monthly, I like to know what dollar amount they don't want to go over as far as a monthly mortgage, because then I won't show you anything over that amount. Know from your lender, like you need to know how much down payment your client has to put down. And that's determined by the lender. That's not determined by us. It's not determined by the client. The lender will give you that information, like they need 3%, 5%, whatever that is. And then the lender will also tell you like what else they need in the offer to make it stick for them too. Like, do they need concessions? Do they need closing costs? Do they need whatever? Like, you got to know that part too. Think ahead. So I say always be like, we're gonna be like 2 to 5 steps ahead of our client, right? So you have to anticipate what questions they're gonna have, anticipate what they're gonna need, and then set clear expectations. I can't scream about that enough. Like, we cannot allow our clients to dictate what we do. We have to set expectations on how we are going to operate in our business. So, for instance, if you know that you do not show houses on Sunday, that is something you need to
Yeah.
set an expectation with them. Like, Sunday is my day off. But you got to tell them ahead of time, because if not, they're going to be like, can we go see a house today? And you're going to continually say no. And then they're going to be like, well, I'm gonna find somebody else because you continue to tell me no, and you didn't tell me this up front. So set your expectations. Be informed. So know, like we were talking about with the cities and what they require, like know what's required in those cities that you're selling in. Already have like inspectors that you can partner with, know what each person's specialty is based on what your client needs. Obey the laws for sure, because nobody has time to be in real estate jail, okay? So we need to obey all our real estate laws, but then just know the laws of the city, like know what your client can and can't do. Like some areas can't have fences because it's an ordinance, for that city. Like know those things that are important if that's important to your client, tell them up front so they're not wasting their time looking in an area where they can't have those things. And then know your documents inside and out. I can't stress enough how important going to Rick's buyer or seller contract classes are, because that's going to allow you to know exactly what's on those contracts. Read them over for yourself, like until you know them. Practice filling them out for yourself until you can do it in your sleep, because there's going to be a time where someone's going to ask you, and you're not going to have it in front of you, but you should already know what they're talking about because you know your contract.
Go over it too. Don't you think? Like when I'm going over a purchase agreement with a buyer, I don't have to read it to them because I can look at the first word in each paragraph and know what it says.
Yeah.
And then I can summarize and get through it relatively quickly too.
And that will also help you. Once you know your contracts, it'll help you read other brokerages' contracts and understand what those are, because they're similar, but they're different. And so you'll know what to look for on theirs.
Yeah,
That could be different, that could impact your client too.
for sure. It's a much harder as a listing agent because you're having to deal with other people's
Yeah.
contracts versus when you work with buyers and you're the one driving
Yeah.
the bus there. So this kind of leads into what you just were talking about, asking purposeful questions. So how do we get to know what the needs of our buyers are if we're not asking them questions? I mean, don't we go to our seller's house and ask them things about the house? Don't you ask your seller, what's the age of the roof? When did you do this update? Those kind of things. We should be asking lots of questions to our buyer. By the way, too, I can tell you this, we know buyers work with multiple agents at the same time. They're always cheating. We can assume most every buyer is probably cheating. They will work with the person who they feel knows the most about what they need. And how do we find that out if we don't ask the right questions? We need to know, why are you moving? That's a pain point we need to know. We need to know, when do you want to be there? Not when do you want. So by the way, don't ask the question, when do you want to start looking? ask the question, when do you want to be in your new home? Those are two very different answers. Then you will find out things like, well, we're switching school districts, so we need to be in by August.
Yep.
And now we know how much time we need, not, I want to start looking in June. Because maybe we need to get them to understand that it might take us from now until then, until they can get in that house if they want to be there by August. Did you all know when someone's changing school districts, as long as they have a signed purchase agreement, they can enroll their child in that district. You don't have to be closed. As long as you show the school that signed contract. So being prepared also has to do with, asking the right questions. Open-ended questions, close-ended questions. So I like to ask questions that don't have a yes or no as the answer.
Yeah.
So be very careful when you're doing that. Because you want to know, not just, do you want to start looking for a house? No, the question's not that. The question is when do you want to be in your next house? And then they have to answer that
And
way.
then the goal with the open-ended is to go 3 deep. So when they say, when do you want to be in the house? They can say, I need to be there by August. Well, why?
Yes.
And how would that impact you if you were not? Go 3 deep so you can really understand the pain of the need. So how it makes them more serious. It makes the client realize, oh, I need to really get my stuff together. And
Also,
it
brings up
allows you
things
to
they
know.
didn't know,
Yeah.
right? They didn't think about too.
Yeah. And it allows you to know how serious I need to be in looking for them a house, like how on it you need to be. Because if it's like, I could move or I can maybe not, if they don't really care, then
And wouldn't we agree? So even investors, their reason for buying a house is very different than someone who's going to live in the house too.
Mhm.
We need to know those things, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump through a couple of these things because we're gonna run out of time really quick today. So this is where we would do some type of a group thing, which we're gonna bypass here. Best practices when presenting your offer. As I said, call the other agent, pay attention to nonverbal cues and pauses in everyone's voice. Like, what is it? If you can read what personality types are, if you're really good at knowing your own disc personality and you can judge other people's, you're gonna know how to respond. Keep quiet and let them do some talking. This is something I'm constantly having to tell myself. I fill voids of quiet with my voice because I don't like silence. So let them talk. Like I have to remind myself, it's okay to ask a question and then really wait for the answer, because maybe my husband is this person who needs to process and he takes forever and I just want to pull the words out. So then I just answer for him. And so it's just different personalities, it's not right or wrong. And you just have to adjust our personality to their personality. Listening carefully to what they're telling you. Don't make assumptions about things. I mean, we find ourselves surprised all the time when people do things that are different than what they told us. Of course, we need to stay calm and relaxed during the process. Like, you cannot have the desperate, I have to sell a house because I have to make money because I have to pay my bills, dictate how you instruct or help your clients negotiate. I also say time. Let me also, before we move to position, time makes a difference too. So for example, if you're negotiating a contract and you're giving a couple counters, there's nothing wrong with at like 6 o'clock at night, letting your client think for a minute before you get back to them with an answer. Because sometimes negotiation starts going too fast.
Yeah.
You have an answer, you have an answer, you have an answer, you have an answer. And then no one's really taking any time, because like you're going to say to the listing agent, you know what, we're going to take the night. If you don't feel like you're in jeopardy of it being multiple offers, just to kind of slow things down, because sometimes people come to their senses overnight. I'll give you an example of someone who wrote an offer over the weekend. It was a $79,000 property. The buyer, because the house was on the market for 100 days, made an offer of $40,000. No inspections, cash, 10-day close. Of course, the buyer thought that was a good offer. I don't care that it's been on the market for 100 days. I know in this market, that's still half. In any case, the seller very quickly came down to 65, which I thought was a huge leap, The buyer came up to 42.5. So then they never got back to them. They just rejected it and the agent never even replied. Because you have to also know this when you're negotiating, you should be matching the other side. If the seller comes down 10, if you're 40,000 apart and your seller comes down 10, your buyer needs to come up 10. You need to match it. And sometimes we get to a point where we're so close that we can just split the difference. So if we're between $3,000, sometimes it's, you know what, guys, I know we're stuck at this $3,000. What if we come up 15, you come down 15 and we split the difference? Believe me when I say sometimes it's not about the numbers. Sometimes it's just about winning.
Yep.
So when you split the difference, that sometimes makes difference. Also this, I wouldn't recommend it, especially with low commissions, but there's definitely been times where I have said to the other agent, look, especially if it was like a 3% commission and I knew the price was high enough, I might say, you know what, we're between this $2,000. If you kick in 1,000, I'll kick in 1,000. Let's get this done. I'm willing to do that in certain circumstances when I just want this to be done.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful of that. Make sure that you're still getting enough commission out of that. Like, don't be doing that on a 2%.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
All right, position. Acknowledge and affirm the common ground. That's something similar to being prepared, right? Ask what and how questions. So what if we didn't get the house? Kind of like I said in my example earlier, when I said it doesn't sound like this is the house for you. How would you feel if we just moved on? So doing that. And then knowing the positioning is a process. So, you know, the negotiating can go back and forth multiple times and we may need to take pauses, as I said, you know, in between, and also knowing when to walk away. Also, again, your buyer and seller might know when they want to walk away, but you also need to know. Sometimes it gets ugly and it's just time to walk away. Even negotiations is still happening during the transaction when it's accepted and you're negotiating repairs and things are getting out of control and crazy. That's the takeaway, which is one of our classes as well. In Ignite class talks about the takeaway method. And I think it works almost every time if you position it properly. It sounds like this is just getting to be too stressful for you. I think this might not be the right house. Or to the seller, it may not be the right buyer because it's getting too personal. So knowing when that is and knowing when the time to walk away is really important.
I think part of that, from the presentation to the position, when presenting, I always call my client, call the seller when I have a buyer. I always call the seller agent, even before I go show, and just build up that rapport with them. Because I'm gonna tell you, sometimes the agent has influence on what offer is selected, right?
Yes.
And and you want to build that relationship with them. And then I always ask, like, outside of price, what else is your client looking for in an offer? So that I know, because it could not
Yes.
be price. It could be that they need possession, or it could just be that they want a clean offer, as clean as you can make it. And so it's always important to ask that question. And I'm gonna tell you, I did get, we had put an offer, a client's a couple of years ago, we had put an offer on a house and we didn't get it. And her and I had talked, built the report, everything. And I was like, okay, you know, so we just kept looking. And then maybe a couple of weeks later, she called me and she's like, did your client find a house yet? And I was like, no. And we didn't do a second on this property. I don't even know why. But she called me, did your client find anything? And I said, no. She's like, well, we want to take your offer. We want to work with you guys. And we're not going to put it back on the market. We're just going to take what you guys offer, which was lower than what they had on the previous deal. And they probably could have put it back on and got way higher. But because I had built that relationship with her, the agent, she called me first. And so now her and I talk a lot because, you know, I'll be like, do you have anything coming up in that area? Because we have a relationship now and she'll let me know what's coming on before it hits the market. So build up those relationships with the agents because that's going to help you as well.
Yeah, you don't
Janice?
want to be the agent known as, I don't want to work with that person. Like, I gotta be honest, if I'm a listing agent and I have multiple offers and there's a difficult agent who writes an offer and I already know what their MO is, it doesn't mean that I'm gonna say we're not gonna look at their offer. We have to. But I will say this, that's something that I'm going to talk to my seller about. I'm gonna say, you know what? Danny, since you're sitting in front of me, the last transaction that I did with him, he did not instruct his clients properly. He you know, he did this, he did that, he didn't do this, or he was bad at replying. That's the other thing. Oh my gosh, this agent is terrible about responding. So I just need you to know, if we accept their offer, we could have some issues with the agent, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with it. That is your story, because you know that you have that experience to understand that. And be aware, you don't want to be that agent, because that could hurt your client in the future. Go ahead, did you have something?
Somebody had a question.
Oh.
Or
I mean,
Yeah.
I was, so
Yep.
it's funny because I just showed a house for Tara,
Huh?
in Akron the other day, and I just so have the seller. I actually worked with him this last summer.
Oh.
It took 5 months for that deal to close, and it was like the deal from hell. And I told her about it, and I said, just be careful, because like, you know,
Yeah.
he's like a wholesaler kind of
Okay.
type deal, and it was sketchy at first, but like he had crew on it and it was fine, but like it was a pain in the ass. And it was that deal that I had things in writing that he would cover my buyer's closing cost and everything that came up on the FHA repair, and he covered
Didn't.
nothing.
Yeah. Mhm.
And yeah,
So
Yeah,
knowing
somebody had a
clients, so
question on
yeah,
here
was it
too.
Carl Ann? Did you have a question?
Yeah, just to touch base on what Janice was saying about building rapport. Also, the same scenario happened to me where I put in an offer for my buyers, and of course they rejected ours because they took another quote unquote better offer. But I always, before I even go out and show a home, I call the agent. I'm just very OCD about calling. And it's almost like, I can't explain it, but you kind of become besties, and then they really like go back and they will talk to you more about things. And, I ask, what do you want? What do your sellers need? How can we make this happen? Because it's a win-win for both of us in the end. But
Sure.
you also have, at least in my case, a little bit of negotiation, because since they didn't take her offer and they took somebody else's, and they got quote unquote cold feet, that next day, that agent, sure as can be, called me up and said, hey, are your buyers still interested in that house? And I said, well, let me go back and speak with them and we'll see, if where we're at. But I was able to negotiate a lower price and to have the sellers include a home warranty. So I was able to get some leverage there with the fact that, I had established a rapport with her, but we kind of got kicked to the curb over this other offer. Then the buyers got cold feet, but that was a great way for me to negotiate in other things in addition to being able to, work on a price reduction. So it speaks volumes as far as, talking to agents right off the rip. It works. It's worked many, many times for me, and it's just a very, good habit to get into, as an agent.
For sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. And especially when it starts to be hard. I love when I'm working with an agent on the other side that I also know from our conversations is instructing their clients properly and not trying to, wouldn't you agree? We all have worked with those agents who they want to look like they're representing their clients, but what they're doing is they're poisoning the transaction, because if you have to be acting crazy about everything, that doesn't mean that your client thinks you're working harder for them. That's like the buyer's agent who walks in the house and points out everything that they think is wrong, that the buyer might have thought was okay to begin with. Like, be careful of those things. I know we've got to wrap it up here, so we'll go to questions, but let me mention, this is the part of Ignite that we would break out into like a workshop where you guys would get together and practice this. So here's the good news. On Monday at 1 o'clock, so we'll still have Dominate Your Week as we usually do, but at 1, is it 1 here too?
Mhm.
At 1 o'clock on Monday at Legacy in person and 1 o'clock on Monday here at Living in Person, we are going to be doing a writing offer workshop. So that's going to be sort of tagged on to this class. And we're going to get together as a group, and we're going to, you guys can, like, one person can be the buyer and one person can be the agent, or we can just all be writing offers, however we want to do it, depending on how many people come. But we're going to have you guys walking through all of the paperwork, and then we're going to role play those scenarios. So that is happening on Monday at 1. I strongly urge you, in particular, the people that are on here that haven't written an offer before, or have only written 1 or 2, and even those seasoned agents who have sold a few houses. There's never a time where you can't learn something also from the workshop. So come and practice your skills, and we're going to talk a lot about negotiations as we're writing those offers as well. So we've got about a couple more minutes real quick. So anybody have any other questions on that?
I did have a question for Janice. I dropped it in the chat.
Oh.
'Cause I had never done this, but it's a great practice as far as putting the purchase agreement in the buyer's packet, or I guess do you do it for both? I guess is my question for
I
the,
do.
okay, that's a
I put
great,
I put the contract, purchase contract in a buyer packet and the listing contract in the listing packet, just so if they don't sign right away for a listing appointment, they have it and they can read it over so that when I send it to them electronically, they can just sign. For the buyer, the same way. And if they have any questions, we'll go over it. Usually my senior, I call them my senior whisperers, they usually have more questions about the contract. So I usually have to go over line by line with them. But I do provide that up front.
So I had the same question. I had the same thing, Janice. This is Toy. I think that was a great. I've never done that either, but you do have buyers and sellers that when it's time to sign, you know, they do want to read it. They do want to understand it, and they're just hoping that you're telling the truth. But if I had time to read a lot of the contracts, then I know I would have asked a ton of questions. So I think that's a great idea. I didn't even know we could actually do that, but
yeah, you just print it out. I just print it out blank. It doesn't have anything. I don't fill out anything on there, but it just allows them to read it. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining. I hope you found this helpful, and I can't wait to hear all your great stories of negotiating, and hopefully we will see you all. I know you're committed to your clients in getting them the house that they want. And so practicing writing offers, here's what you don't want. And I can tell you it happens all the time. And I know Janice feels my pain. Some people don't come to anything. Some people come to some things, and then they don't follow through on the important things, such as coming to writing offers classes or broker contracts classes, or learning how to use dotloop or the tools that we need. As a licensed agent, you have decided that you are going to be available to your clients when needed. And in particular, a buyer, when they want to see a house right now. A listing appointment, we can push the pause button a little bit. You can schedule it for like Saturday and then call us on Tuesday and say, hey, I've got a listing appointment coming up and we've got some time. But with a buyer, you never know. I hope you're out there talking to your world and you're putting stuff on social media, and you never know when someone's going to say, hey, I saw that you got your real estate license and I want to see a house, and God knows that's the house they're going to make an offer on. And it will not be at 3 o'clock on Wednesday. It will be at 9 o'clock on freaking Friday when they make the decision they want to make an offer on Sunday at 6. So that is why we take our time to do these things and like these writing offer workshops. So what I'm getting at is be there, make it somehow, some way, come in. And we did it at 1 o'clock. So it's the middle of the day. So for those of you who work, if you can maybe do your lunch hour, then it's a great opportunity to go through the contract, because you don't want your first time to be when you actually have a client who wants you to negotiate on their behalf. You need to have some skills. Would you want to make the largest purchase of your life with someone who's never done it before or even practiced it? So I expect to see a lot of people on Monday at that 1 o'clock workshop so that we can help you with that.
And then if you're at Living tomorrow night, we have the meeting with Lynn at 6 p.m. for Command. So remember, for those that are a part of Living, to be here tomorrow evening at 6.
All right, guys. Let me mention one more thing. Janice and I are putting together, and I'll be real quick because we've got to get in this team meeting. We're putting together we'll call it a KWPC certification. So it's not legit, meaning some type of actual certification, to be able to be agents in coaching who other agents in the office will dip into to host opens for them, as well as use to show houses for a fee. So what we want to do is we want to say you guys are KWPC certified to do that. So we're going to be compiling a list at both offices of agents that are well-trained and equipped to host opens and well-trained and equipped to show houses on their behalf when they're on vacation or they just can't do it. Go ahead. And so therefore, that the first step in that is going to be knowing how to practice and write offers. So that's going to be one of the trainings that's going to be on that checklist. So we can get that checklist done. There's going to be a series of things that we'll talk about that you'll have to do to be on that list. So this way, so it's not so random. Whenever an agent in the office calls me and says, hey, I've got this listing and I can't host it, but my seller wants it open. Do you have anyone in your program? I'm going to say, yep, I've got 8 people on my list. Here's the list. You can decide who you want to use. And it's a great way to get a partnership with another agent in the office that will let you host opens on their behalf. And it's needed. Trust me. I never want to host another open because I'm not trying to work with buyers. So every time I list a house, it's always fair game. So I will say there's a lot of other agents just like me at both offices. So it's a great opportunity to get into a relationship, but to be able to be on that list, there's going to be some criteria. All right, guys.
Okay, I
Thank
know,
you.
hold on, I
Thank
know,
you.
hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know Janice mentioned tomorrow at 6 PM. Is that gonna be
That-
in Solon?
That is going to be in Solon. Yes, and that's a Lynn command class.
It's a land command class at 6 PM. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your day.